Pro Wrestling Weekly presents Today in Wrestling History, October 29. On this date in 2000, WCW held its Halloween Havoc pay-per-view. In the main event, Goldberg defeated Chronic in a handicap elimination match. On this date in 1949, Paul Orndorff was born. The WWE Hall of Famer known as Mr. Wonderful turns 62 today. On this date in 1995, WCW held its Halloween Havoc pay-per-view. In the main event, The Giant defeated Hulk Hogan by disqualification to win the WCW World Heavyweight Championship. This has been Today in Wrestling History, October 29.
You are listening to Pro Wrestling Weekly with Fearon Dairy.
Thank you, Eazy-E. Eric Bischoff. A little bit of a promo there here on 1490 WBCB. This is Pro Wrestling Weekly, and man, Halloween Havoc 95, that was interesting to say the least. Obviously, Jimmy Hart turning on Hogan and being manager of the Dungeon of Doom. You also had the Yeti involved. I'm sure that makes you chuckle a little bit, helping the Giant attack Hogan. Savage and Luger tried to come to Hogan's aid, but Luger, of course, turned on Savage, and Luger joined the Dungeon of Doom as well. So kind of the Dungeon of Doom, a precursor to the NWO, and that it seemed like everybody was joining it for a little bit. And because of all the confusion from the pay-per-view and the clause snuck in the contract that the title could change hands because of a disqualification, yeah, the title was held up and eventually went to the winner of the three-ring 60-man battle royal at World War III, the World War III pay-per-view a month later, and of course Savage went ahead and won that. A little bit of a history lesson there. Love throwing that out there. Let's go ahead and get back to the phones. We've got Steve, who's been waiting patiently. Steve, welcome to Pro Wrestling Weekly.
How's it going, Braun?
Hey there. What's on your mind?
Well, the two matches I'm thinking of, maybe they weren't Halloween Havoc. The two I'm thinking about is Sting versus Vampiro and Sting versus Vader. Were they Halloween Havoc matches?
Sting and Vampiro. That, well, I know that was fairly late in the run. I don't know if, I don't think that one was, at least Sting Vampiro, that wasn't a Halloween Havoc. And what was the other one? Sting and Vader?
And Sting.
Oh, man, I'm sure they faced each other at some point. I'm just trying to think back.
Now, do you think Hollywood Havoc was created for the Road Warriors because two painted wrestlers that WCW really brought in and tried to elevate quick?
Oh, it certainly seems that way. I mean, they were featured, they were certainly featured rather notably, at least early on. I mean, the very first one, they were in the match right before the main event, facing the Skyscrapers. You know, that good old Sid Vicious and Danny Spivey. Oh,
that must have been, that was the alternate team. The original team was Undertaker and Sid Vicious. Before Mark Callis joined the WWF, he was an original Skyscraper.
That's right. That is good Skyscraper knowledge by you, Steve.
Well, you know why he left, don't you? Ole Anderson took him to the side and he said, I'm going to tell you straight out, you're never going to get a title shot here as long as Ric Flair's here. He hates your guts. There's some kind of animosity between those guys before they both joined the company. And I said to myself, it's amazing. Even back then, Ric Flair was playing politics. He picked him out of the crowd. He said, I never want to wrestle this guy for the title.
Huh. Go figure.
Yeah. So, really, every time Undertaker, he should thank Ric Flair. He made his career.
Yeah, without that, there would be no streak.
No streak, no WrestleMania, no nothing, because he knew that Vince loved the big guys.
Mm-hmm.
The thing is, Vince didn't even recruit that guy. He had to be brought in.
Yeah.
In the beginning, Vince didn't want him. He had a reputation. If he didn't get paid what he thought he was worth, he would come late. He was a problem guy in the beginning. It was only later that he said, I got to make some money here. I got to show up on time. I got to get along with the people in the locker room.
He became a little bit more professional.
No, I think what it was what I read in one of the books that really went after him. I don't know if it was Brett's book, one of them. He was on the verge of bankruptcy when he came to WWF. He was that bad. And he kept blaming people. He started blaming the people in Texas, the Legends, the Von Erichs, because they're the ones that brought him. That was his introduction to the big time. And the guy who was the spoiler trained him. And he didn't get him off. The Von Erichs didn't pay what he felt he was worth, so he moved on to the bigger company. And they didn't. They promised him a lot of things, but in the end, he didn't get it then. And he said, well, the last big company is the WWF. If I don't make it here, I'm quitting. And he gave him some time. And it took a long time for Vince to figure out, how am I going to use this guy? Is he a tag team wrestler? If he's going to be a heel, is he going to be a good heel and do what I say? Because in the beginning, they didn't know what to do with that guy.
He was just kind of there. I mean, they had obviously had...
Well, I think he even said it himself, the greatest thing that ever happened to The Undertaker, really, was when Hogan left for the first time for WCW. They didn't have to worry about him anymore. His shadow wasn't on him anymore. He could be what he wanted to be. Independent. He could go his own way. Because he saw what Hogan was getting. He was getting creative control of his character. And that's what he wanted. He said, I'll just have to bide my time.
Yeah, and then 93 hit, and that allowed the Taker to kind of be elevated into that main event picture. And, well, of course, injuries kind of, didn't exactly help with that. Of course, the first thing I think of is the 94 Royal Rumble, where he was challenging Yokozuna for the title, and next thing you know, 10 guys are putting him in that casket.
Well, you got to remember, he finally got his own little clique, too, at the end, which I think he always wanted. He got Kane, and then Bradshaw, yeah, kind of the... Those guys, you know what it was? They finally got what he was. He just, he wanted his own thing on his own terms. I'll be a joiner if it makes me money and you guys money too.
I'd like to think he made quite a few dollars for the WWE over the course of the last 20 years.
You take that if it wasn't for WrestleMania, we wouldn't even be talking about the guy. Like I told you, remember your old partner? I said the only dream match left was him and Sting in WrestleMania in a casket match, but Vince won't allow it. And I think to him, he said, I think if I'm Undertaker, he said, oh God, I don't want to wrestle somebody that might be more popular than me. That always bothered him.
I don't know. Do you think that Sting, at this point in his career, even 5 years ago? 5
years ago would have been probably the last chance for it. You think when did they buy it? When did they buy WCW? 2002?
2001. So that was 10 years ago.
That would have been the time to get that match in. And that, if Vince was thinking long term, this is great. I'll have my icon beat their icon, and everybody will forget about WCW.
As if he hasn't done a good enough job of that already.
Well, he destroyed ECW. And WCW would have just been the next logical step. And he could have everything under one. But remember what Sting said. He said, Vince McMahon is what's wrong with the business.
He did say that.
And it's funny, though, all his contemporaries, like Flair and Goldberg, they finally went to the dark side and they saw who was paying the most.
Yeah. Well, it was who was still standing at the top of the heap. I think was more the issue. Well, they couldn't go over to Turner because Turner by that point was ousted by AOL Time Warner. He had no real influence and control over the company.
They always say that Vince Russo destroyed the WCW at the end, but I think there were a lot of people with blonde hair that had destroyed it before Vince even got his chance at it.
Well, actually, there are a number of ways, and I guess I'll give a little bit of a plug here because it is a very good book. The Death of WCW. It's written by R.D. Reynolds. He's the creator of a site WrestleCrap.com.
Right.
Yeah, I mean they pretty much analyze. I mean from start to finish what happened to WCW, and they kind of point out. I mean it wasn't any one particular thing, but a number of different things. I mean from Vince Russo to Hulk Hogan to Kevin Nash to Eric Bischoff. I mean there are a lot of fingers to be pointed.
The three entities I always look at are Flair, Hogan, and the Horsemen. And the Horsemen are separate entities to themselves. It wasn't just JJ. That Horseman group was the locker room. They decided a lot of things before things happened. And a lot of times Flair and Hogan had to go along.
Well, but I mean, by that point in the late '90s, though, I mean, the Horsemen.
No, I'm talking about the Ole Anderson.
Oh, okay. You're going back. You're about 10 years behind where I am. Okay, you're back in the late '80s.
Ole and Arn Anderson. When I heard and read, I always thought the real control was Flair and Hogan. But I understand that in the locker room, you know that Hulk Hogan and Ric Flair had separate dressing rooms from everybody else. They didn't share the locker room. The Horsemen shared the locker room with everybody else. And things were said in the locker room that Hogan and Flair never heard. And I think at the end they realized their so-called best friends, the ones that came up with them, were the ones that stabbed them in the back.
Interesting stuff.
I mean, you think Flair and Hogan had to go back to the WWF. The Horsemen, you know, they kind of disappeared after the company went kapooey.
Yeah, there's been no talks of reviving the Horsemen. I mean, the closest you got to that was in 2003 with Evolution. Right.
Well, if you really want to look at when they gave Ric Flair his retirement party, and when I saw the Horsemen come out, I said, "This is wrong. Those aren't the Horsemen I remember." You know, the original Horsemen were Telly, Arn, Ole, Lex Luger. They were your four Horsemen, and J.J. Dillon. Others joined later. But
wait. Tully, Arn, Ole, and Luger? No Luger Flair?
Were the originals. And remember, you know what they did to Lex when he first came in? You know what they called him, don't you? Because they were talking about him in Florida, in Georgia Wrestling. Said, "We have an associate in the Everglades, and his name is Lex Luger." He had to basically beat up guys that the Horsemen didn't want anything to do with.
Mm-hmm.
He had to beat up Nikita Koloff, Ivan. He had to beat all those guys up just to prove he was good enough to get in. And then they made him a full-fledged Horseman, I think, when Ole retired. That's when Tully and Arn became a tag team. And Lex Luger's job was to beat the crap out of the number one contender before Ric Flair got to him. His job was to soften up those guys. And he loved it. He lived for it.
Yeah, that'll have to be something. I'll have to see if I can get him.
That's right. You interviewed him. You should ask him. You should. I don't know if you would have asked him this thing. Who's the guy who made your career, J.J. Dillon or Ric Flair? And I think you'd be surprised at the answer.
Well, I mean, like I said, I kind of scratched the surface with a quick. Quick. I mean, I wish I could have gone on longer with him, but it was about 10 minutes or so. But I'm going to work on getting in contact with him, see if I can get him in perhaps for a full hour or something like that.
Did he change a lot physically since he's been off the stuff?
Well, I mean, he's obviously had a lot of health issues. So I mean, he's still rather tall, but obviously he has leaned out considerably because I mean, after that spinal stroke, I mean, walking has been an issue, let alone lifting weights. So,
see, I remember back in the day when him and Ric Flair, this is no joke, they would tag up and beat the crap out of the Road Warriors once a month just to let everybody know who was the team, and anytime they wanted to. And Luger would carry the match most of the way, and they'd save Ric Flair for the figure four, and that would be the end of it. That's how Lex Luger was the Horseman jobber. Anybody that was getting in their way, it was his job to take them out. And then he changed, and then once Ole retired, the whole dynamics. I think the Horsemen they all wanted to go their own different ways.
Yeah, and that's where obviously Barry Windham came in, and then there's that Paul Roma era that we don't necessarily want to speak of.
Barry Windham came, from a good generation of stock. I mean, his dad, who his dad was, and Ric Flair. Yeah,
Blackjack. Why am I drawing a blank?
Not Lonzo, the other one.
Mulligan.
Yeah, I mean, remember Flair and him and Ole Anderson. All those guys came up together, Minnesota. That's where they got their start. And I always wonder about that Minnesota connection in WCW. All those guys from Minnesota, when they came down, they made the company, and I think in the end they broke the company. Yeah.
Interesting stuff. Thanks, Steve. Always appreciate it. All right, let's go ahead and get one more here. We got about 5 minutes left. Let's go to John. Oh, this should be interesting. John, go for it.
How's it going, Fearon?
Not too bad. What's on your mind?
Well, we're all talking Halloween Havoc, but, it's interesting. So I got the Wikipedia up on it. Actually says the MGM Grand had 5 of them, the last 5 consecutively, and it was all in Vegas.
Yeah, they did it. That's pretty new. I think they started that, in 96, I want to say? They started that, and it kind of just became an annual tradition type thing.
Yeah, sort of like how TNA is just never leaves Florida. It's just, maybe that's for the best of us that stays in Florida.
I don't know. I mean, I enjoyed going to Bound for Glory when it was here in Philly.
I had some good pictures. They were really, really good.
Yeah, it was a good time. I mean, obviously there were things to kind of nitpick, but you can do that with pretty much every pay-per-view.
And that's with either brand. I mean, you can go either way. It's like you can look at Unforgiven, and for them to mention the Brock Lesnar angle, and now you got the talk of, the WWE 12 with Brock Lesnar in it. It seems to me that was kind of like an homage to him. I mean, I don't know if we'll ever get him back into the ring. I mean, who knows? I mean,
if you do, it'll probably be a one-time big payoff, like WrestleMania maybe type deal.
Yeah, I don't know if it'll be against Taker, though. I think that because the build-up for him and Triple H at the next one will be just a huge, the huge rematch. I don't think they'll make him go 20-0 on Brock Lesnar with so much hype built behind Triple H.
No, I definitely agree with you on that.
And, we mentioned Barry Windham's name. We just want to get some well wishes out to Barry, who during the week suffered a heart attack. I don't know the specifics. Nobody's really saying much of anything. I posted the article up on the Facebook page about Barry. And one of the things I thought that was interesting in there, because you know about Patrice O'Neal, and I thought it was interesting that they mentioned him. And, Patrice was a writer for the WWE, but wasn't there very long, and just want to get our well wishes out to both Patrice and Barry for a speedy recovery, and they're all in our thoughts. Yeah,
thank you. I was going to get to that in news and notes, and for whatever reason, after like a lull of phone calls, midway through the show, all of a sudden the lines start lighting up. Patrice O'Neal, he's a comedian. He had a brief stint as a creative team member with WWE, and obviously a longtime member of Opie and Anthony's kind of inner crew there. Suffering a stroke. I mean, all you can do is wish well for both him and Barry Windham. Obviously, a Hall of Fame caliber wrestler, and has been around quite a while. Obviously, take that little brief realm as the stalker out back in '96. Yeah, we won't bring that up necessarily, but no, the rest of his career, obviously, with the Horsemen and. In the early 90s, very, very notable to say the least.
When you look at the Halloween Havoc Wikipedia, he's all over it. He's all over the early ones in the mid-90s. He's all over it.
Yeah, I mean, I'm flipping through my notes here because I have to admit I can't necessarily remember everything, but I'm trying to look at some of the earlier ones here. Barry Windham.
Well, Vader replaced him on one of the cards.
Yeah, Vader filled in because he was injured in that the Chamber of Horrors match. Yes. Oh my goodness! Now that's interesting in itself. El Gigante, who later became Giant Gonzalez, Sting and the Steiner brothers against Abdullah the Butcher, Cactus Jack, Vader, who was filling in for Barry Windham, Cactus Jack, who filled in for Oz, better known as Kevin Nash. And the Diamond Stud. Who, if I remember right, wasn't that Scott Hall?
I believe so. Yes, you're correct. It is Scott Hall.
Wow, that was fairly early Scott Hall. There's another one who, I mean, it seems like everything's just been like a downer. I don't know. Maybe it's because of the weirdness of snow being in this area in October. I don't know.
Well, it is. It's just there's really not much going on. I mean, when you got Twitter being the subject of Monday Night Wrestling, any news outside of that, I mean, even if it's bad, would seem somewhat interesting and something noteworthy to talk about. Yeah, I mean, next week we're going to be talking Muppets. Yes. Well, see, I'll tell you what. I may be in the silent group on this. I'm actually thinking that might actually be entertaining. Well, you know what? I mean, I marked out when Bob Barker hosted The Price is Raw, so, I mean, anything's certainly possible. But, yeah, I mean, I'm all for it. Kermit, Fozzie, I can only imagine what they do with Gonzo. Well, you could only imagine what they do with any of them. It's definitely a wild card. I know we're up against the clock, but it's a simple question. When you interviewed Kurt Angle, you didn't get, as you were doing the interview with Kurt Angle, you weren't pulled over, were you?
Well, no, my program director, he was the one who did it, but Paul was in studio. Angle was, well, he was on a cell phone, so I'm not sure where he was. I don't believe he got pulled over, but...
On his way to the Olympic Games?
No, he's still working on training. He's getting that hammy healed up. All right, I got to run. We're up on the top of the hour here, John. Thanks so much for the call. I appreciate it. I'll have the archive in case you missed any of it up. I'll put that up in the overnight tonight. Stay tuned. Bill Melody up next with the Country Music Hall here on 1490 WBCB.